First subject in the video, maybe the only one if it goes on too long, black powder 10 gauge, a YouTube video. Somebody left a comment where they said a bunch of things and weren't completely clear in what they said. This will come up later. That's foreshadowing and boss music. And what they said was, depending on how you read it or how bad the punctuation is completely wrong or completely right. Legal definitions aren't reality definitions. Even if you don't like that, that's the way it is. The law can say that a piece of cardboard or paperboard folded a certain way is in and of itself a machine gun, even though no matter what you do by jamming it into the magazine, it won't go off. But it is a paper version of a lightning link, otherwise known as getting a chunk of cardboard or a playing card stuck in a standard semi-automatic rifle, and then it just starts firing. It's a debris malfunction that causes it to go full auto. That's not you legally making a machine gun. That means you need to open up the mechanism, get the garbage out of it. But the ATF doth decide, so yeah, reality doesn't match legal definitions, especially because the organization isn't. Let's not go there. So, statements by the individual, slightly edited. This is literally what the person really did say. I'm doing it as a run-on sentence to make a point. And then later the individual corrected themselves instead of editing it to say, oops, I said a dum-dum, this is the correct answer. But they did correct themselves, and they're technically correct, and that's the best kind of... The term black powder referenced, past tense, flintlocks, muzzle-loading rifles loaded through the muzzle during King Henry's reign. That's nice. We didn't have necessarily what we have now. There were no center fire or rim fire loads, or other words like that. I'm saying that because this is an argument I see on the internet a lot. You look up the definition for something, and you don't like that that definition is mostly based on the legal system that does not have to match reality in any way. Loading a shell with black powder doesn't make it a black powder, doesn't make it black powder. Or doesn't make it a black powder load. Yes, it does. Or doesn't make it a black powder firearm. Actually, it still could be. If it's still a shell casing, if it's center fire or rim fire, it's a cowboy load. Then the person later on corrects themselves. Loading shells with black powder or pyrodex instead of smokeless powder is called a cowboy load. That is where the person's getting it from. Okay, so they've corrected themselves without admitting they made a damn mistake. If you aren't willing to explain to everybody, I made a mistake, you'll keep making them. And I think I've made this mistake once before. Probably. Just because you load a shotgun shell with black powder does not make it a black powder gun. Okay, now we're getting to the point that, no. A vast majority of shotguns specifically, I don't know why you pick this example, this is a fucking bear trap. The vast majority of shotguns were only black powder. They said black powder. This is a black powder firearm. Black powder limited firearm. Black powder exclusively. Or black powder only. Or black powder proofed only. And if you're bringing up King Henry, etc., I don't even remember when he was around. It doesn't matter. The point is, in Britain, they require that if the gun is only supposed to be firing black powder, it says it's only black powder proofed. But if any of you are listening, unless it has an incredibly weak mechanism, you can just change the barrel out for a smokeless powder or nitro-rated barrel. Which you should do. Instead of, okay, I'm going to bring up something that's horrible. If any of your gun geeks don't listen, just pause. I'll hold my hand up while I do this. And then when I take my hand down, you can listen. Some people take a black powder only shotgun or rifle or whatever, drill the bore out, and put in a liner. Instead of just loading it with gunpowder and using it the way it was designed. And in some cases, it's appropriate. If a gun barrel shot completely out and relining it, you're going to want to put in a nitro-rated liner anyway. A lot of guns are made that way on purpose, so you can change out what the gun does for shooting skeet or hunting or whatever. It totally changes it. Also, I'm an advocate of using subcaliber inserts for firing completely different rounds through a barrel that you just sit inside of the other barrel. Those aren't so horrible, but we won't talk about the other thing. But yeah, if the gun is only rated to black powder, it doesn't matter if it's using cartridges or if it's a muzzle loader. You can get a nitro-rated muzzle loader. Yeah, it can take anything. That means it'll take anything. It means it's completely safe, unlimited or unrestricted. Some countries have a rule about this. You can load rifle shells with black powder. That does not make it a black powder firearm. Also make sure it doesn't work depending on the design. Gas impingement, anyone? And unfortunately, I have to explain, yeah, there are some actual rifles that are black powder only that use modern casings. They used an antiquated casing, but it was still a center fire or rim fire, and then they would rebore them for the next chambered cartridge they could get that was the same pressure limit. And if it was center fire, rim fire, they would change the pin position if needed, firing pin position. And yeah, it's still a black powder rated only gun, and it was made for black powder cartridges, but cartridges don't mean it's not black powder. And last, black powder firearm in the law means that it uses anything other than cased ammunition that is modern. If a cartridge is outdated, ironically enough, if it's a true 4-gauge shotgun, it's considered antiquated and black powder, unless you make it brand new, or you use modern metals. And because the ATF makes these rules the dumb way they do, it's based on the low receiver instead of the barrel. So changing out the barrel to where you can fire absolutely anything you want to do without any restrictions doesn't change whether it's a black powder firearm. I can get a break top, muzzle loader, 12-gauge handgun. I'm going to talk about a single barrel in this case. It's a sawed-off shotgun, but the thing is it's not legally a sawed-off shotgun because it's never been a shotgun. It's a low receiver for a pistol that I could actually get away with making it a 4-gauge handgun. It's a big, big bore because it's a flare gun. And if I take that barrel off and put on a legally long enough barrel, I'm allowed to put a buttstock on it and put a standard shotgun barrel on it. It doesn't change what the gun is legally because the part that's taxed in the United States is the low receiver and is the only part the government wants to pay attention to. The ATF has to limit what they do it for. If it was designed from the beginning to just be an overbuilt handgun, putting a long barrel on a handgun doesn't make it illegal. It's not a short barrel anything, and that's the main thing they're worried about. And I'm allowed to put the short barrel back on, with a few exceptions that they decided to come up with because reasons. But the point is, you can have a 10-gauge or any shotgun or any rifle that uses cartridges that was designed and is purpose-built for being a black powder-only limited firearm, and that legally and mechanically and practically is a definition for it being black powder. In the United States and in other countries, it's only black powder if it's a muzzle loader, and until it's not. Did you know that there are black powder-only guns that are breech loaders? They're not required to be muzzle loaders. They open up, unscrew the breech, you pack in a muzzle loader load, screw in the breech cap, because most muzzle loaders have an unscrew breech cap. This one's a quick pop-out one. It uses interrupted threads. It's almost like a bolt action. You put in your load, put it in, and then put the you pull the firing pin back in these, and you put on your primer, and then close the action up. There's even one that looks exactly like a bolt action that way. And that's not modern ones, that's some of the older ones. They were faster to load than sticking it in through the muzzle. They also allowed you to use a squeeze bore, and loading a squeeze bore from the muzzle kind of defeats the purpose of squeezing down a big fucking bullet. And those are muzzle loading rifles. They're not required to be flint locks. They're not required to muzzle load, which is the reason in intelligent countries like the United States, it's not required to be a muzzle loader. It's required to be black powder limited only, of a design that was that way, and does not use cased ammunition. You're mixing up American legal definitions with reality. Don't fucking do that. All right? There is no such shut up. I mean, we're literally shut up and sit down. Of course, someone came up with the idea of taking the then slightly newer idea of a muzzle loader that you could take the breech cap out so you could clean it easier. And someone figured, hey, I can just put the charge in from the back end and screw it in. Hey, I can cut the threads so I can put it in and crank it shut and it works fine. I mean, you might catch a mouthful of metal if you eat the breech plug, but it did exist and there were lots of them made. It just wasn't the most common. And it was the forerunner to a bolt action. at least partially. It's cited in one of the patents I looked at a couple of times. But no, that doesn't count because I need to win an argument in the comment section on YouTube. Next, everything I'm saying can be contradicted by somebody who wishes to use a different legal definition, or in your case, maybe a different country's legal definition, or whatever. Just because the law says in an authoritative way that it's right or wrong to do something doesn't mean slavery's legal. Okay? I don't care if it's legal, it's wrong. We don't care. No, do you want politicians deciding the PSI limit for a gun? No. Then shut the fuck up. Please. And of course, this was done under a video where someone loaded a 10 gauge with 10 gauge shotgun shells with black powder and loaded a slightly heavy duty standard 3-dram load for a 12 gauge. These are little popper loads. They're slick as snot, easy to fire, no negative effects of any kind. If you have a really old gun, or if you don't know the age of the gun, always assume it's black powder rated only. And if you're going to do that, you're better off using a black powder or black powder substitute or equivalent load, or just buying shells from people who know what they're doing. Next, every time a muzzle loading person, I'm referring to them specifically, loads their gun, they're doing the authoritative experiment of I trust how much I can measure things. Yeah, so to review, if you see this kind of guy in the comment section, don't take advice from them. Next, don't take my advice. Go learn about the shit and test everything from 50 feet away behind a sheet metal barrier or something. Pallets work well for this. And next thing is, unless you know what you're doing, don't. And the last thing is, no, it's not a black powder gun or black powder firearm only if it's whatever definition you have. You can decide it's the legal definitions or the real definitions. Every one of these arguments is completely valid. Therefore, none of them are. Yeah, I sound like Syndrome from a certain movie. Anyway, thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that. And if you'd like to argue the point below in the comment section, please go ahead and do so. All it does is jack up the ranking for the video, and then YouTube will flag it because they hate me.